Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about defending the bench press as an actual chest, tricep, and overall upper body exercise. Because oftentimes people go through these phases. They have these little periods of time where, at least the bodybuilding physique world, they'll come out against the power lifts, right? They'll come out against the power lifts as useful exercise, or like where they ruin physiques. They don't build muscle that well. And people will attack the bench press. But then by that same token, you'll have plenty of experts with advanced degrees, PhDs and things in exercise science, biomechanics, things like that, who think the bench press is a fantastic upper body builder. It's fantastic chest exercise. So it's a little silly when people want to go against the grain just to go against the grain. And I'm not saying we should follow trends automatically. And I'm not saying just because something is popular means that it's correct, because oftentimes that isn't the case, and we need to look at these things objectively and ask ourselves, is this really based on reality? Is this popular trend? Or is it just a trend? And I mean, a perfect example of, to give you guys, is like the body part splits and stuff like that. Those are trendy. They've been trendy a long time, really long time, like in the physique world. But they really only work that well for guys on drugs or who are willing to spend an extra 5 years to get the same amount of growth. I mean, they work, but not that well. And you'll find most of the experts out there will agree with that point. So when it comes to the bench press, I'm going to get into what it actually does work and why it works. But I think something that people need to remember when it comes to popular exercises, that's not a bad thing. In a way, if something is a relatively safe and effective exercise and it's extremely popular and all the guys at the gym are doing it, that can have its own psychological motivation. I mean, if we want to talk about motivation and consistency and the desire to improve, men are very competitive. We're competitive by our nature. We compete with other men. If all the other guys at the gym are bench pressing, it is actually going to motivate you to some extent to improve your bench press and get good at it. All right, it's going to motivate you. And truth be told, if you get strong at the bench and you don't cheat and you actually do it correctly with good form, with a pause and everything, and you're still lifting a respectable weight, no one at the gym is going to make fun of that. Like the other guys, even the guys who cheat and bounce it off their chest and stuff, are still, if they train hard, they're still going to give you the nod of respect, even though they might be lifting more than you with their bizarre form and bouncing and ass lifting off the bench, and their spotter helping them lift the last 6 inches of the rep while screaming it was all you. You guys know what I'm talking about. They're still going to give a nod of respect. When they see you hitting 300 plus with a pause, or you're doing work sets for reps with anything over 2 plates a side, and you're actually doing it with clean form, pausing and all that, you're going to get a nod of respect. So to a certain extent, a popular exercise like the bench press, in which a lot of guys at the gym will respect, has its own psychological motivation. If anything, the fact that it's a popular exercise, assuming it's a good exercise, that's the point. Assuming it's a good exercise, the fact that it's popular works to your advantage, because you're going to be more motivated to compete with others on that. You're going to be more motivated to improve your performance, and you're going to get results as a result of that. So the fact that something is popular should be seen as a good thing, again, as long as it's a good exercise. The other thing that we need to think about with some of these big conventional lifts is what? The fact that they are competitive conventional lifts means there's an enormous body of coaching material available. Why does that matter? Well, let me put it to you this way. If there were two big exercises capable of stimulating nearly maximum muscle growth in multiple muscles in the body, right? And let's say these two exercises work the same basic muscles and a similar function, and they're capable of producing equal results. But one of them has decades of high-level coaching around programming for it, perfecting the technique, perfecting accessories for it, because it's a competitive lift, and the other one's a new oddball lift that no one is an expert on. Which one are you more likely to get the best results on? The conventional exercise. Because you have access to a larger body of high level and professional and world level coaching material available on it. You're going to have access to better information that's going to allow you to perfect that lift more effectively. At least you're going to have the potential for that. So the fact that something is a conventional competitive lift is, again, as far as finding good coaching information and getting good at that exercise, you're going to have access to better, higher quality, and more information on it. The oddball new lift or the unconventional lift may have less data and information available. Therefore, it's not going to give you the same potential results as far as being able to get help with it. People do non-conventional exercises to show off and to hide their strength. That's the only reason they do them. There's actually negatives to doing non-conventional exercises, in that oftentimes you can't always get the highest quality information on them. So it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. And people that build impressive physiques off a handful of conventional lifts just fine all the time. I've given you guys countless examples of guys who are ultra jacked, look way more impressive than I do, who built their bodies largely off of these basic lifts. I'm giving you guys a ton of examples. They're out there. They're out there. Totally can be done. And in fact, that's actually the path of least resistance because of the information available. So let's get over to the bench press. People will argue, well, it doesn't work the chest that effectively. Really? Look at what it does. It has an effective range of motion for the chest. In fact, you have Athlean X admitted, hey, for most of the range of motion, it's superior exercise. It allows for handling the heaviest weights possible through an effective range of motion. He points it out. You have other coaches who pointed that out. The EMG data shows it hits the chest pretty effectively. And yes, not just the lower chest. It does work the upper chest to some extent, but you're overhead pressing anyways, right? You guys are doing the standing press. Well, that should handle any upper chest development issues you have. Right, that will fix your lagging upper chest if you get strong on that also. And again, enough exercise selection on the basic lifts will cover that. Bench press can be a fantastic primary chest builder. It allows for a long range of motion, and it does. And the people who say that it doesn't aren't pausing, or they're maybe going ultra wide. That's one of the big disadvantages, right? That's one of the things that because it's a competitive lift that people go ultra wide and arch on for powerlifting, that can reduce the range of motion. That can reduce the impact it has on the pecs. But you see a lot of top coaches out there, like Paul Carter's a perfect example, recommends close grip benching. He recommends close grip benching, and he's a 500-pound bencher. He's benched 500 raw in comp, and he's a coach. But he does close grip benching most of the year. Why? Because it's a longer range of motion. It's harder. It will put the chest through a longer range of motion. All right, you build your base that way, and then you show off with the other. So as long as people don't do excessive arching, and they keep the grip medium or narrow, they don't go ultra wide, you are actually moving the pecs as a primary mover through the long range of motion. The only disadvantage, people will argue about the adduction, right? Oh, well, you need a fly for the adduction at the top. Do you? The pecs do get abduction, particularly with a slightly narrower grip. It's just that it's with a somewhat lighter load. But here's the question. Is it really a lighter load compared to the cables and the flies and other stuff people are doing trying to get the same effect? Of course not. And besides, those are using through a longer range of motion, right? They're using a weight that's not challenging near the stretch, and then it gets heavier near the top for them because that's where a lot of times the cables work. What happens? All the work is really being done at the top. Well, on the bench press, you fatigued all the rest of the chest on the way up. And that's what people need to understand when it comes to range of motion. When you do a long range of motion with a heavy weight on an exercise, particularly like the bottom where it's really hard, you fatigued most of the chest already at the bottom. So when you get to the top, what happens? If you're doing a significant workload with a heavy weight, you've already fatigued most of the other muscle fibers. And even though there's less load because of the moment arms involved at the top, if you're still using a respectable weight and you've built a good workload, you're still going to get that adduction at the top. You are still going to recruit those muscle fibers. And I would suggest that it's only people with really lagging chests who need to worry about that at all. That you'd be surprised if you get strong on the bench press, keep a medium grip, get enough workload, pause at the bottom, you'd be shocked at how big your chest will get from the bench. You'd be really surprised. And you start throwing in stuff like overhead press, pull-ups, all of that other stuff that work different aspects. Again, it balances out. Same thing, triceps. We start looking at all the EMG data. We start to find that the bench press works the triceps as effectively as any tricep exercise does. In fact, we have human studies that show that if people do a sufficient workload on the bench press, that if they compare it to groups that add tricep extensions in, We have multiple studies showing that the tricep extensions don't even cause any extra tricep growth over the bench. The bench itself actually builds, for people, at least we know novice lifters, builds maximum tricep size. They don't get any benefit from adding a tricep extension if the workload is high enough on the bench. You see tons of benchers out there talk about the importance of triceps for the bench press, like world level benchers. It's because the triceps are a primary mover. You can build massive triceps with the bench press. You get your bench press up strong enough, you're not going to have small triceps. You're not going to have a small chest, particularly if you're doing a fairly long range of motion. You're pausing on the chest. You're going to have well-developed pecs and well-developed triceps. I'm not saying that's the only thing you ever need, but let's be honest here. If you aren't arching really heavily and you're not doing an ultra-wide grip, you are moving a big-ass heavy weight through a pretty long range of motion. Something has to be worked. You can't lift heavy weights through long range of motion with your bones. You can't do it with your tendons. Those things don't contract. They don't have the ability to move weight. You're doing it with muscles. And what do you think is moving it? You really think it's just the tiny little anterior deltoids? If that was the case, everyone would have a 300-pound overhead press really easily, wouldn't they? They don't. It's your pecs. It's your triceps moving that way, particularly if you do it from a pause, from a dead stop. All right, guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.